It all started, well, in actuality, it's probably started a couple of years ago, back when I found that scroll in Stars for the Bearded archives back in Canterlot. The scroll that gave me the chance to go back in time for a few minutes. After that escapade, I continued to work on the spell for a while, but eventually gave up on getting it to do much more. Apparently, though, there was another me somewhere else that had managed to get it to do more, a lot more. It was that spell that brought me and my friends here to this world. I miss them so much right now. Rainbow Dash with her arrogance and loyalty, Applejack with her pride and honesty, Rarity in her snobbish way tempered with her generosity, Fluttershy, her anxieties eased by her kindness, and even Pinkie Pie. Her craziness made easier to deal with by the way she always was able to make us laugh. It was a bright sunny day, one of the best that season. Even Rainbow Dash had worked hard to make sure it was a nice day, clearing the clouds earlier than normal with her usual level of quality. We had planned for a nice day down at the lake, and I was getting some things ready for our lunch, when suddenly a wind blew through my library. At first I chalked it up to an open window, but none of the windows happened to be open at that time. The wind began to increase, with sparks appearing in the air. Surprised, I dropped whatever I had been holding at that time and stared in disbelief. It was the same effect that occurred when I had used the time-traveling spell, but this time it appeared to be much more substantial. I stared into the center of the library, waiting for another visit from my future self, materializing. In the midst of the sparks and whirlwinds, a blue unicorn appeared, dressed in what appeared to be a long dress and cloak, blue and white striped mane flying in the wind. After she finished materializing, I glanced around in disbelief before her eyes fell on me, and the shock to her system was apparent on her astonished face. She stumbled back into my table, then fell over, reaching clumsily behind her to break her fall. Her eyes fell upon her own hooves, and they grew even wider, if that was possible. Staring down at her forelegs and hooves with astonishment, she looked around the room once more as I studied her, recognizing her form almost immediately. "Trixie!" I exclaimed, impressed despite myself. "What are you doing here? How did you manage to get that spell to work? I never realized how much talent you really had." Trixie looked up at me, mouth agape, then closed it before attempting to stand back up. She moved like a newborn foal, unsure of where to put her legs, overstepping more than once before she managed to get herself upright. It was then that I was able to study her more closely, and what I noticed surprised me greatly. She looked haggard and worn, as if she had been through a great ordeal, overall appearance. Her dress was ripped and torn in places, and appeared to have been patched more than once. Her cloak was rough cut and looked as though it had been continuously exposed to the elements. Finally managing to stand, she looked as though she was about to speak, but then began turning this way and that, as if looking for something. Concerned, I offered to help her. "What are you looking for, Trixie?" She continued searching for a moment before muttering, "Where is it? Where is it?" Her voice, usually airy and superior, was full of worry. She continued searching for a moment before muttering, "Where is it? Where is it?" Her voice, usually airy and superior, was full of worry. "Where is what?" "My staff!" she cried. "I can't do magic without my staff." I was confused at this. What unicorn needs a staff to do magic? Trixie, what about your horn?" Her horn was right where it's supposed to be, on her forehead. She stopped at this, then reached up and felt her forehead, hooves bumping against the solid horn there, the source of a unicorn's power. She sighed with relief and began to relax. "I'm sorry," she replied. "I'm just not used to this body. As long as I have my magic, I'll be alright. She gestured around the room, including me in her sweep. I knew this would be a different world, but I didn't think it would be this different. Now it was my turn to stare at her, mouth agape. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. She looked at me with a seriousness I had never seen before in Trixie. I am not the Trixie you know, she said with an air of apprehension. I could tell she wasn't sure I believed her, and she was right. Though the Trixie I had last seen had been much more put together, it had been a while since we had met, and I couldn't know what she had been doing in the meantime. I am hoping that I'm in the presence of Twilight Sparkle, she continued. Surprised, I replied, Well, of course. You remember me, don't you? She shook her head. The Twilight I knew is much different from you, though you share the same eyes and hair. I am glad that it is you, for I don't have so much time to explain. I need you to gather your 5 friends and bring them back here as soon as possible. It will be easier if I explain it to all of you than to explain it multiple times. As I stared at her, confused, Spike walked into the library, carrying some of the picnic items. Twilight, I got all the things you asked me for. Noticing Trixie for the first time, he jumped and dropped some of his load. Whoa, when did Trixie get here? I'm gonna need more food if you invited her. Trixie turned expectantly to look at the newcomer and started violently. Who is this? She demanded, stepping back. Twilight? Spike asked, looking at me. What's going on? Trixie, it's Spike, I replied, concerned. You know, my assistant? She regained her composure and replied, Yes, Spike, of course, I remember now. I suppose he can hear my story as well, but we must act quickly if I am to explain myself. Your research had extended the spell duration for quite some time, but I still only have half a day at most. We must not dawdle. I stared at her, confused, until her impatience began to show. Right, I understand. Turning, I spoke to Spike. Spike, can you go and round up everyone as soon as possible? Maybe get Rainbow Dash to bring Fluttershy and Applejack while you get Rarity and Pinkie Pie? Spike saluted me and replied, Sure thing, Twilight, before running out of the library as fast as his legs could carry him. Turning, I noticed Trixie inspecting her forelegs once more, and apparently marveling at her horn. Feeling confused and awkward, I tried to decide what to do with this unexpected visitor, before settling on watching her and hoping she would volunteer more information. When none was forthcoming, I decided to break the ice, hoping that Spike would be able to locate my friends quickly. So, what are you doing here? I asked, somewhat lamely. She looked at me, hesitant to speak, and then offered a response. I need your help, desperately. My world is suffering, and you and your friends are the only ones who can save us. She saw my look of further confusion, but refused to elaborate more. It will be easier if I can tell all of you my story at once. Please bear with me until then. I nodded. Then, thinking she looked like she had been through quite an ordeal, began casting around for something to offer her. Would you like some food? She nodded gratefully, and I reached out with my magic and grabbed some of the food that Spike had prepared earlier for our picnic. Floating it over to her, she studied both it and my magic carefully, as if expecting something unpleasant. After appearing satisfied that there was nothing to worry about, she attempted to pick up the food with her forelegs, knocking it down onto the floor. Looking up at me in shame, I merely smiled and proceeded to clean up the mess. Placing the food more at head height, she got the idea and bent her head to begin eating. After she had finished most of her food, the door opened and Rainbow Dash came in, followed by Fluttershy and Applejack, who was looking rather cross. Twilight, I know you're excited for the picnic, but come on, she complained in her distinctive accent. I was in the middle of chores when Rainbow Dash here swooped in and said we had to skedaddle over here as soon as possible. Her eyes landed on Trixie, who was now attempting to drink from her cup with moderate success, and she stopped in her tracks. Now what in tarnation is she doing here? Trixie's eyes lit up at the sound of Applejack's voice, and she dropped her cup, the drink spilling out on the floor as she turned to look at the newcomers. Her face fell slightly as she realized that only 3 of my friends had arrived, but she seemed heartened by their appearance. I spoke up. Trixie's here because she has something very important to tell us, and has only a short time to do it. We're waiting for the others to get here before she starts her story. Applejack continued to look grumpy, but seemed to accept that. Fluttershy, however, looked anxious. Something important? Are you sure you need us? Trixie nodded. You 6 are the only ones I can think of now. You're truly my last hope. As the other 3 gaped at her, the door opened again and Spike came back, followed by Rarity and a bouncing Pinkie Pie. As soon as the others saw Trixie, their astonishment was obvious, with Rarity responding in typical fashion. Trixie, dear, whatever happened to your outfit? You look horrible. Trixie smiled a very tired-looking smile. It's nice to know that some things never change regardless of where I am. She proceeded to lift her cloak, showing off her dress. You made this for me, long ago. I've done my best to keep it intact, but I'm no seamstress. I? Rarity replied. I've never made anything for you that I can recall. Trixie shook her head. It will make more sense when I finished explaining everything. I'm glad you all came quickly. My time here is running short, and there is much to explain. My friends all looked at each other, confused. What are you talking about? Rainbow Dash asked. Trixie bowed her head for a moment, apparently collecting her thoughts. When she looked at us once more, there was a determined look on her face, something I had never before seen on her. Then she spoke, and we heard one of the most incredible things I had ever heard before, or even considered. As I told Twilight before, I am not the Trixie you know. I am the Trixie from another world. Surprised. This was definitely not what we expected to hear. She pressed on, determined to speak as quickly and precisely as possible. I came here to beg for your help. My world has been destroyed by a force beyond our control. We have tried our best to resist him, but everything we've done has failed. He has destroyed all forms of resistance and put horrible beings in charge of our world, who continually inflict pain and suffering on the good people of our world. Wait, interrupted Applejack. Who is this he you're going on about? Discord, Trixie replied. He has taken over our world with his horrible powers and turned it into an oppressed wasteland. Discord? I replied, but we took care of him a while ago. He's been turned to stone once more and can't hurt anyone. That was here, in your world, Trixie said sadly. Unfortunately, in our world, your attempt didn't work. But what about the elements of harmony? Why didn't they work? Trixie hesitated, then replied, the elements don't work if the ones they are bonded to are dead. She paused for a moment, a weight settling on her shoulders, and her meaning sank into us all. Dead? Stammered Fluttershy, hunkering down. How? Discord killed you all in my world. There is no one there who is able to use the elements, as Discord killed them during your attempt upon his life. As I understand it, he took the elements and gave them to his most powerful servants to keep watch over them. But whatever can we do, dear? Trixie paused for a moment and appeared to be gathering her courage. She finally spoke, saying, I would like to take you back to my world with me. I believe that since you have defeated Discord in your past, you can defeat him in my world. We all stood, stunned at her request. How? I ask. How can you take us to your world? For that matter, how did you get here in the first place? You, Trixie said simply. It was you and your research into that time spell that allowed me to come here. You spent much time trying to modify that time spell you found years before, trying to get back far enough to stop Discord's rise to power, but you were never able to extend it beyond a few hours' time. However, shortly before being killed, you and I had managed to get the spell to extend to other worlds as well. This is how I found you. This is my last hope. But how can that get us to your world? I can take you back with me when the spell ends. I believe we have 1 hour left before I will be pulled back into my world. I hope to bring you with me once that happens. Rainbow Dash gave a rather arrogant smile and waved her hoof dismissively. No problem, we'll just grab our elements, go back with you and take out Discord. We'll be back in time for dinner. Trixie shook her head. I wish it were that easy. The problem is that the elements only work in the world that they originated in. Your elements will be as rocks if you were to bring them to my world. You need to get the elements in my world and use them. How would we get back? I asked, concerned. Trixie looked away slightly. I should be able to bring you back when you're done. I believe that since you're native to this world, the spell shouldn't bring you back to my world. Are you sure? Asked Applejack. Trixie lifted her head, looking determined. As certain as I can be, she replied. A silence fell as we all ruminated on the new information. After a minute, I asked, Can we discuss this? You're asking an awful lot of us. Trixie looked hopeful. Yes, I will give you some time. Please remember, I have less than an hour before the spell will pull me back to my world. I nodded. Turning to my friends, I beckoned them to the other side of the library. They all crowded around me, including Spike. Well, what do you think? Rarity spoke first. I'm not certain about this, Twilight. Are we certain we can be of any assistance? It sounds like it's truly a nasty world where she's from. I don't know about this, Twi. Applejack spoke up. I mean, we've been through a lot of crazy things, but this sounds truly crazy. How do we know this isn't just Trixie trying to pull one over on us? I shook my head. I saw her arrive, Applejack. It looked like just when I visited myself in the past. That same light, the same whirlwind, and she has already been here much longer than I was when I cast the spell. Besides, her story rings true to me. Well, I'm with you on this one, Twilight, Rainbow Dash spoke up. I'm ready to suck Discord in the face once more. She sounds like she really needs help. Fluttershy moved a little closer to Rainbow Dash, huddling in her shadow. Really? I don't know if that's a good idea. She shuddered a little. Discord was really scary. Yes, that's true. He was a truly horrible person, Rarity replied, contemplating. Maybe we do need to help her. I can stomach the idea of letting Discord run free anywhere. But what about our duties here? Interjected Applejack. I've got stuff to do on the farm. Big Mac and Applebloom can handle everything by themselves. We're also the ones who can use the elements of harmony here. Who's gonna help Equestria if something happens? Pinkie Pie, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. I think we should do it, guys. We all jumped slightly and turned to look at her. She looked unusually serious. Why's that, Pinkie? I asked. She looked at us as if we had completely missed the point. Well, duh. It's obvious, isn't it? Her world is so sad, we need to do something to make them happy. She looks like she could really use a laugh, but there's nothing for her to laugh at. Rainbow Dash nodded vigorously. She's right, you guys. We need to help her. I think we can do it. I nodded. I agree. I think there's much we can do. Besides, I've been studying lots of spells that might be useful during this quest. Rarity nodded as well. I'm with you then. Applejack looked disappointed but eventually nodded. All right. If you're going, I can't let you go by yourself. I'll go too. We all turned to look at Fluttershy, who huddled further into Rainbow Dash's shadow. "Well, Fluttershy?" There for a minute, shuddering, then finally sighed, looked up, and quietly said, "All right, I go." I smiled. "Thanks, Fluttershy. I'm sure you'll be a big help." We all turned to Trixie and I approached her. "We'll do it," I announced. Relief flooded her face. "Thank you so much. You don't know how much this means to me." She glanced at the clock on my wall. "We have roughly half an hour before the spell ends. Now, by that time, I need you all to hold on to me, and I will bring you back to my world. If there's anything you need to do right now that you can get done quickly, now's the time to do it." Applejack looked at me, troubled. "We should at least leave a note or something for everyone." I nodded. "I agree. Let's write one quick. Spike?" Spike grabbed some paper and quill, and we dictated a note to be left behind, explaining what was going on and hopefully when we'd be back. Trixie watched us during this, wistful and somewhat closed-faced. At the time I thought it was just because she missed her old friends, but now, after all we've been through, I think it was because she truly had no idea whether we would come home or not. After we were done, Trixie motioned us over. "It's almost time to go. I believe that there are only a few minutes left. Please, everyone, take a hold of me. Once the spell ends, we will be pulled back to my world." We all huddled against her, holding on as best we could. Spike appeared to be waffling for a minute, then, after pinning the note to the table, rushed over and grabbed onto me. I smiled, thinking he was just giving me a farewell hug, but he continued to hold on, even as the whirlwind from before started up, and light began to surround us all, including Spike. "Spike!" I cried. "Let go or you'll be pulled with us." He shook his head and cried over the sound of the wind. "I'm not letting you go by yourself. You know you'll need me to protect you." "Spike!" I yelled. "Don't do this!" But at that time I was too late. As the whirlwind picked up speed, the light fully enveloped us and everything went white.